who's ever been in the military or in, sort of more disciplined pursuits is familiar with the idea of chain of command. That is, that you've typically got somebody at the top of things and that it kind of works down over the sort in a sort of a progression from one person to a couple people to two, depends on how many people you've got involved. But you might have a person in charge of, for example, in the Air Force, a squadron, and then a person in charge of a section or whatever, and then you might have people who actually run the shifts for the section and so forth. You've got this chain of command that goes on. And that's the sort of thing that I want to talk about on today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. By the way, I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Glad to have you aboard today, whether it's on Rumble, on YouTube, or the podcast. Today is Sunday, the 21st of March of 2021, and again, the subject is going to be where the buck stops. And I sort of want to handle that a little bit differently than I think a lot of people are doing so, and I particularly am talking with regard to politics. The thing of it is this, right? Just because a person is overall responsible for a given thing does not mean that everything that happens in that given thing is that individual's responsibility, right? That's not how that works. Somebody's responsible for something, yeah, great. But if they're the person on the very top, at the very apex of the food chain, as it were, okay, you can't blame that individual for everything that happens in their organization. And the bigger the organization is, the less true that is. The less that's the case, the less you can actually say they're responsible for any and everything that happens in their organization. All of this being said and considered, though, when you have people who put them, we have a term, and I know you've heard this term. The term is micromanager. And lots of people use this term. And the basis of the term is that somebody sticks their fingers into every little aspect of an area that they're supposed to be responsible for, instead of allowing the people in that area to do what they need to do. They're constantly sticking their fingers in. I've worked for multiple micromanagers over the course of time. I'm not going to tell you if I do now. It's not the point, right? What's important at this point is to realize that that's happened for me in past. So that's where we're going to stop with that. That having been said, when people micromanage, suddenly they also do something else, and that is they become responsible for things. And they become responsible for those things because they're the authority that makes the decision on them. Now you can argue, let's take an example. Let's take the current president and the situation on the border, what many would term a border crisis. Is the current president, is Joe Biden responsible for what's happening on the border? Well, I would make the argument that he is. But the funny thing about it is, under normal circumstances, I would not do that. The specific reason I make the argument that he's responsible is, if nothing else, messaging, and quite frankly, a tendency towards micromanagement. Now, to be fair, his predecessor in that regard also did some micromanagement. But his micromanagement was to say, no, you're not coming in. Basically, was to say, we're not going to make exceptions for people and make it so lots of people are able to cross our borders without concern over the fact that they're doing so illegally and potentially being turned back as a result of having done that. That was his sort of micromanagement. So you can say that Donald Trump was somewhat responsible for what happened on the border on his watch. You can say that. That's a fair statement. Likewise, you can say that when somebody tells you there will be no deportations within the first 100 days of the administration, that person is basically messaging, basically signaling to those around and about that it's time for them to try and make their way to the United States if that is in fact what they want to do. Because what he's telling them is, we're not going to deport you, and if we're not going to deport you in 100 days, chances are way better that you're going to be able to stay in the long run. But nobody's going to stop you, that you're just going to continue to be able to be there. So Where normally I don't blame the person at the top. I do blame them if they find out something is wrong and don't work to either fix or appoint people to fix the problems. But I generally do not blame them if they just weren't aware that something was happening. And the bigger an organization you're in charge of, the better the chances that that's going to be the case. I used to tell people that the CEO of HP was responsible at one point for 250,000 lives in one sense or another. If you expect that individual to have a pulse on every single thing that's happening in their little big organization, right? CEO of Walmart, right? CEO of HP. If you expect them to have their finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in their company, you are out of your mind. And it's no different for a country of 330 million people, okay? But when you take pains, when you make it specially your thing to say something about something, and then you make it clear that you're going to follow through on that, you need to know that you suddenly become responsible for something you might not have been responsible for before. With regard to Barack Obama, I don't know if he was aware that there were kids in cages. As such, I don't know how responsible he was for that. When it was pointed out to Donald Trump that there were supposedly kids in cages, and I'm not even sure that's a valid characterization to this moment, but when he found that out, he started to take action, and he became, as it were, at that point, a sort of a micromanager, though I'm sure a large part of what he did was to get other people working to make things right, to make things better. I'm not sure they were wrong to begin with. That's a really hard question. But assuming they were wrong, assuming even that they weren't wrong, that just is a bigger feather in his cap that he still responded in such a way that people really had very little that they could say to and about Donald Trump by the time it was all said and done. Again, what was the story with Barack Obama? I don't know. What is the story with Joe Biden? It's pretty obvious. Because of his messaging, because he's telling people it's cool to come into the country illegally, now you've got a bunch of people who are seeking to do that, and it is creating a crisis on the border. And in this case, I would say that the people who are actually working on the border are not the ones that I would blame for what's going on. Why? Because of the messaging that's been put forth. And where has it been put forth? Has it been put forth at the low levels? No, it's been put forth at the very highest. It's been put out there at the very highest levels. So you have to know that there's going to be an expectation that people are going to hear that. And in fact, I heard somebody recently to have said on the border, Joe Biden said that we could come in now. Basically, that's what they said, right? And I know Barack Obama's secret stash, right? There are people who will believe things that aren't true. I get that. But if you look at Biden's messaging, if you look at Kamala Harris's messaging and the messaging of others at this point in time, you will see that it is consistent with the idea that people should be able to come into the United States if they choose to do so from elsewhere and not worry about deportation. Now, here's the thing. Other countries deport. That's normal. Or at least detain, and typically detain, and if the person is lucky enough to ever get out of jail, then deport. So that's not an unusual thing. But the point I'm making is this. I'm willing to concede that just about anybody sitting in an office like the office of the President of the United States is not responsible in a first-hand sort of way for things that happen on their watch. Obviously, that does not mean that when things are pointed up to them, they should not take notice and then prioritize and decide what's important enough to get their time. So if they find out that that illegals are crossing over the border in massive numbers, that's something they probably ought to take care of. And again, I'm not denying that their messaging makes a difference either. I'm just saying that for most things, blaming the person sitting in the office of the president is a bad idea. All right, I am about done with my video for the day. Again, thank you if you're on Rumble, on podcast, or on YouTube. If the podcast are on YouTube, if you happen to be listening to this and listen to this point. As I've said, today is Sunday, the 21st of March of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Monday, the 22nd of March of 2021. And tomorrow's Daily Summation is going to be on setting priorities. There was a little thing that I saw recently that really got me thinking about how people deal with the idea of setting priorities. And I've sort of talked about this before. I've talked about what's important, and it's sort of the same thing, but there's a little bit of a difference in that I want to talk about the idea of deciding what's important as opposed to just, sort of trying to tell you what is and what isn't important. All right. Again, hopefully you're having a good day today, and this is the beginning of the week in many people's estimation. I know that a lot of folks are doing the spring break thing around this time of the year. I am dealing with that with my son, so you're maybe going to hear a little bit more noise when I do my videos for the next week, and that's just how that's going to have to be. Hopefully, as I say, you're having a good day, and hopefully we will get a chance to see you again tomorrow. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Sunday, the 25th of March of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.